Robotic dogs are already used in Ukraine on a small scale. At times, exercise videos from China also showed various Robodog models being used for scouting, cargo hauling, and other roles. Some even had firearms on their backs. But this video will go further. It will show how robotic dogs might, within just several years, be utilized on a massive scale. A scenario such as a Chinese invasion of Taiwan illustrates the scale. Imagine tens of thousands of robodogs descending onto the island. Their volume could overwhelm defenders locally, enough so that the beachhead is established. To understand the plausibility of mass robodog usage, look at the precedent set by cheap commercial drones in the Ukraine war. Their use surged dramatically, from a few thousand units per month in early 2023 to tens of thousands by the end of that year, to 1.5 million drones procured in 2024. For 2025, Ukraine's defense ministry has announced plans to triple that number. Now, such numbers are possible only because the cost of the parts is minuscule, often just hundreds of dollars per drone, because FPV drones are a commercial design and product, and because China is there to actually produce so many components, from which numerous Ukraine's companies assemble them. Commercial robodogs aren't super expensive either, particularly Chinese models like Unitree's Go2, which started at around $3,000, but since then the price went down by half. Though such commercial models have limitations, mainly in sensors, autonomy, and communication, they're not prohibitively expensive for military adaptation. While Ukrainian forces use robodogs with minor modifications, Chinese military and defense contractors are pushing boundaries. Some carry machine guns, some carry rifles, some carry small-form missiles, others carry advanced sensors or smoke generators, and crucially, many seem to have added specialized communication antennas. This one video in particular is interesting. It demonstrates a fireteam-like robodog unit, 2 armed, 2 carrying additional sensors, all with additional antennas. While impressive, autonomy remains a bottleneck. Current AI cannot reliably interpret battlefield environments. Sure, some obvious targets it might be able to attack, but in a real war against a competent opponent, many dogs would get shot from a distance. That's why remote control is still crucial. They can walk and navigate obstacles, but threat assessment is still a human task. Even Ukraine's autonomous FPV drones aren't truly autonomous. They fly toward their targets and highlight potential enemies using object recognition software, but the operator still selects final targets. So what could happen in the next few years, specifically in China? Why China? Because it's the biggest producer of, well, pretty much anything. With China's industrial capacity, producing 50,000 or 100,000 units for their military is very feasible. A robodog might cost even less than $1,600 in mass production for China, though making a similar one in the US might be a few times more expensive. Current cheap robodogs just look at their immediate environment, so additional military-grade sensors will be added, seeing farther than humans. Also laser rangefinders and thermal cameras, seeing through smoke and darkness. We are talking about $10,000 to $15,000 or so worth of equipment, which would add to the cost of robodogs. That's high-end commercial equipment that rivals the military-grade sensors of 20 years ago in quality, but cheaper. But that's not all. Additional gunfire detection is crucial. Microphone-based solutions like the Boomerang system, which the US Army ordered 17 years ago, 8,000 gunfire detectors for $9,000 per system. Their role included detecting AK-47 fire. Today, similar systems from India's GridBots offer 3 times the precision at a lower price. China could likely mass-produce them even cheaper. It's possible the complete Robodog package would cost $20,000 or so for the US military. China could get it for cheaper. Robodogs with wheels on legs offer flexibility. They save energy on flat terrain, but can still navigate obstacles. That's why legged robotic platforms would be used instead of simpler vehicles. Otherwise, defenders could easily stop vehicles simply by using barricades. Now picture this. During an invasion, Chinese transport aircraft and ships approach Taiwan. Chinese Air Force and rocket artillery has softened up defenses in the days prior. Long-range SAM systems in Taiwan have been more or less neutralized. Only the smaller, more mobile and harder to track SAM systems of medium and short reach are left. A large wave of transport planes is approaching Taiwan. Planes are full of pallets, with each holding dozens of robotic dogs. Robodogs are strapped to a simple one-time use mass-produced wing gliding kit, not unlike what Russia made for their glide bombs. Pallets get thrown out of the plane. Individual Robodog glide kits then get ejected from them, very much like the US tested its Rapid Dragon cruise missile dispenser system. Now, a Robodog is much smaller than a cruise missile. The exact model would be heavier than Unitree's Go-2, mentioned here for reference. But even a 60-pound robot with additional sensors and a lightweight wing glide kit, it's still not gonna go over 100 pounds. Basically, C-17 being able to carry and eject 45 cruise missile suggests it would be able to eject over 400 Robodogs with glide kits of useful size. The Chinese Y-20 transport plane is not that much smaller than the US C-17, and lately China has been making over 20 of those annually. Basically, in a few years, it's plausible the invasion run we are describing here could feature something like 30 large transport planes, each carrying over 350 Robodogs. After ejecting, the glide kit spreads its wings much like a missile, and while losing altitude, it gathers speed and glides to the target area. In Ukraine, half-a-ton bombs are now gliding for 50 miles using fairly crude wing kits. It's likely a much lighter Robodog package with an aerodynamic fairing could easily do over 100 miles, basically not putting the transport planes at risk. The glide packages would still be fairly fast. In Ukraine, most glide bombs, despite being bigger in size, are not intercepted. Still, many such gliders would be shot down as they reach the target area. But many would also survive. As they would get close to the ground, the wing kit might detach the Robodog package with the parachute, or the wing kit itself could hold the parachute. The landing area might span something like 6 by 3 miles for some 10,000 Robodogs. Ideally, thousands of Robodogs would land just outside enemy lines, but Taiwan's dense defenses might make that impossible, hence the high Robodog losses. And unlike trained paratroopers, they're cheap and replaceable. Losing a skilled human warrior is a big hit. Losing thousands is a catastrophe. Plus 30 Y-20 transport planes would drop 3 times fewer human paratroopers compared to Robodogs. So 3 times fewer units on the ground. Sure, humans would be a lot more capable individually, but far less replaceable. And if the enemy lays precise artillery fire on the landing grid, both humans and Robodogs would be wiped out in a fairly similar fashion. The immediate problem is, of course, autonomy. We are simulating this happening within the next several years. So those Robodogs still need periodic input from controllers. They're far from being as smart as humans. The Robodogs wouldn't use broadly directional long-wave communications like in Chinese army exercise videos. Instead, they would rely on millimeter-wave narrow-directional communications. Basically, a variant of 5G network using directional beam-forming antennas. Crucial aspect would be to have the entire Robodog formation act as a mesh of communication nodes. On top of that, at the rear of the formation, additional drones, likely flying ones, would be needed to continue the mesh network all the way to a safer distance in the rear, where large communication nodes could handle data for the entire network. In theory, they could also use satellite terminals on their backs. Both Shahed drones and large quadcopters in Ukraine have been spotted with Starlink satellite internet antennas on their backs. But Starlink-like system would likely not be enough to support the number of distinct channels Robodogs need. Millimetric waves are harder to spot and jam, though 5G-like signals would limit the distance between nodes, meaning Robodogs, to just hundreds of meters. So a flock of drones would also be flying in the air, over the sea and near the beach landing zone. Those would basically be communication relays, and those would likely be set with satellite-based communication terminals. Now the enemy would still try to jam the signal. To be efficient though, the jammer would need to be placed in between the Robodogs and the flying communication node drones. That would not always be easy. A well-planned drop zone could overwhelm initial defenders and then keep its back clear of threats. Also, for mass-produced low-cost jammers to be truly effective, they would have to be really close to the object that's jammed, like 100 yards away. You often see videos of FPV drones in Ukraine losing video feeds just before they hit a tank, as jamming becomes too much. In this Robodog scenario, dogs would still have rifles. Instead of ramming into targets, they would shoot from 200 or 300 yards, outside the range of numerous low-cost jammers. And any successful jamming would likely affect just a part of the node network, which could then try to realign using autonomous movement to reconnect to the network. Robodogs' main role, however, would not be engaging targets on their own. If their sensors spot an enemy soldier and Robodog operator okays the designated target, resulting in the Robodog shooting the enemy, that's just icing on the cake. But the main role of that whole mass of thousands of Robodogs would be luring the enemy fire onto them. On one hand, not shooting the dogs would be impossible. If the enemy lets them get too close, they will eventually spot them, relay info, and get those enemies bombed, or the dogs will start shooting themselves. But if the enemy shoots the dogs, those gunfinder sensors, optical sensors on dogs, and escort drones overhead, all those will pinpoint fire positions, and Air Force bombs, rocket artillery, or various loitering munitions will swoop down on those locations. Basically, the main role for such large forward Robodog formations would be one of tripwire fodder, provoking the enemy to reveal its location. Robodogs would not be very capable by themselves, but that's not the point. They would be dirt cheap and easily replaceable for many more such waves. They would be a much cheaper and superior version of convict troop fodder in Ukraine. Both sides are known to have sent such troops, with very little training, to the front line, mostly to serve as triggers to see where the enemy is. After the first wave, more Robodogs could arrive via unmanned landing craft, adding tens of thousands more to the battlefield, while defenders are still reeling from the aerial drop. Human troops could follow right thereafter. All should happen within the battery lifespan of the first robot wave. Even 40,000 Robodogs would cost just $1 billion, the cost of 12 F-35 stealth fighters, because we established each one is unlikely to cost over 25,000 with ancillary equipment. In China, 40,000 Robodogs would likely cost less than $500 million. To put that in perspective, a salary for one US soldier recruit over a course of 6 months needed to train the soldier is currently some $12,000, but that's just a small part of the cost. The whole infrastructure costs way more. To recruit and train one Marine with equipment and salary included cost $45,000 back in 2002. Today, with inflation, that would be $81,000. Now, Robodogs also come with additional costs: operator salaries, training, and communication infrastructure. But most of this investment is preserved. Robodogs themselves are cheap to replace. A human casualty means a bigger financial, institutional, and moral loss. Training another soldier takes months or more. Robodogs could be manufactured by the hundreds each day. Benefits of such Robodog assaults are clear. They would be door breachers and force multipliers, not replacements for human troops. Near-future technology is simply not there to replace humans. Improvements in autonomy will keep helping. Autonomy doesn't have to be something special. Dogs just need to keep going forward, scanning the area and alerting the controller of possible movement or gunfire sources. At times, they could automatically return fire. Robodogs themselves are quiet, and batteries, even on cheap commercial models, last for 2 to 4 hours depending on use. Beyond frontline use, Robodogs could be covertly dropped behind enemy lines by stealth bombers. Equipped with satellite terminals, they could act as scouts or diversants, messing up logistics or communications. In total war scenarios, mass-produced Robodogs could be used in human wave-style ground assaults, partially like FPV drones are used today, but unlike drones, they would be persistent. If you're an industrial power like China, the US, or maybe Germany or South Korea, all this will soon be feasible. Smaller nations may lack the resources. Why not use just flying drones instead of a combination of a drone fleet and Robodog army? Capable quadcopters could be built for $2,000, enough so that they could carry $10,000 worth of further equipment, but flight still limits their persistence. They don't physically occupy the battle space for as long as Robodogs do. Batteries drain quickly, and drones' lift method precludes them from using microphones detecting gunfire. Plus, they would have to be fairly large to handle all the necessary sensors and weapons, making them easy to track against the sky and shoot down, compared to the dogs hidden in the ground clutter. Those communication node flying drones would be the weakest link of the mesh, would be attacked often, and would need many replacements. All said so far remains hypothetical, but not by much. Every component already exists. Glide kits, sensors, directional antennas, good deal of the software, and even armed robots. Granted, today's AI is likely not quite up to the task for what was described in the video, but we may be just several years away from needed AI quality. Vast communication mesh networks would also need validation, but there too we might be just years away from implementation. The integration and mass deployment of these systems is a matter of will and time. We may soon witness robotic dog hordes fighting alongside or ahead of human soldiers in the wars of tomorrow. And remember, Binkov may talk about war, but only real peace can bring us all together.